Now let's get to our conversations today. Nigeria's new National Industrial Policy 2025 has placed energy reforms at the heart of its strategy to revitalize the manufacturing sector with a strong emphasis on renewable energy adoption, state-level electricity autonomy, and private sector-led power solutions to drive productivity and competitiveness. Unveiled last week in Abuja by the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, the policy document outlines a comprehensive framework aimed at moving the country from policy to productivity by addressing structural bottlenecks that have constrained industrial growth for decades. Top amongst them are unreliable electricity supply. And the policy comes at a time when Nigeria's manufacturing sector remains under significant strain, weighed down by unreliable electricity supply, elevated production costs, limited access to finance, persistent infrastructure gaps, and a heavy dependence on imported goods. Well, let's start this week with this beautiful conversation. My guest is the Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadri. Thank you so much. It's good to start the week with you, DG. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Tolu, for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you on your show.
Thank you, DG. And it's great to start the week, like I said again earlier. DG, we were in Abuja together for this very historic event. And I would like to start with you this way. The crop of guests at that event, the likes of Alhaji Aliko Dangote, we saw CEOs of industries. We can go on and on if we have to start mentioning names. But I must say that those that matter in the world of industrialization or industries, running industries in Nigeria, were in that room. What does that speak to with regards to that document? Some say so much of consultations were done, but tell us more about what we don't know. Why did we have such heavyweights in the room?
Yes, thank you again, Tolu, because I always like the way you introduce your issues. You leave the listener with a sense of purpose. And when you are driving issues of national importance, it is always good to set a context so that everyone who is listening will know that it is not just a conversation. And this one has to do with what a nation that aspires to develop and care for the well-being of its people should be concerned about. You did mention that there were the right people in the room, and that is what it takes to translate policy to action. So why you have so many people in the room was because 65 years of independence, we've never had a comprehensive industrial policy like this. The one that was co-created by the public and the private sector. The one that took into cognizance the aspiration of the private sector on one hand, and the long-term objective of industrializing Nigeria by the public sector, i.e. the government. So we've had a long period of between 6 to, I think, 10, 11 months of working together with the Minister of State for Industry in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, and his team, technocrats, civil servants, international agencies, and people that should be concerned about the industrialization of Nigeria. We had worked together to co-create a policy that focuses on key areas that Nigeria identifies as critical to its industrial development. That's why you have that presence in the room, which signifies co-creation, alignment, and expectations as well for an industrialized Nigeria.
Now, I've seen that document, read through it. It has some, I think, different stages. I think we have stages that we need to get to. And of course, different aspects of the economy or the challenges that it intends to achieve. DG, we've seen beautiful documents like this, and that was also raised at that gathering. But implementation, sometimes many will say, remains the challenge. What do you make of implementation of this very new document? How seamless do you think that will be?
Yes, honestly, Tolu, when we were informed by the ministry that this was in the offing and that we needed to create a climate of private sector support and collaboration, we doubted the capacity of the ministry and the minister in particular to deliver this policy within 1 year. So we had our doubts that it will just remain like every other plan, measure, or policy of government. But what has differentiated this one is the fact that the policy is not coming as a standalone document. It is matched by an implementation plan.
Okay.
An implementation plan that outlines the basic objectives that is in consonance with the policy itself, what the statement of the activities that are needed to be embarked upon, who is supposed to do it, that's the actors, whether it be ministry, the private sector, international agencies, and so on. And then we have timelines for implementation. Some of them are short term, medium term, and long term. It's generally spread over a period of 1 to 10 years. And then we are able to create what success should look like. So if within the time frame we have set, we are not seeing what we ought to see, then we start to approach government to say, hey, you are not abiding by your own document. And because this administration is not going to go beyond probably another 2 or 6 years, we still have a 4-year period that we must ensure that the succeeding administration will have something to hold on to. So we are able to solve for the deficit trust, the trust deficit that government has, while people are apprehensive that things will not be implemented. And the actors are a climate of both public, private, and international organizations. They rested on existing structures, rested on the existing incentives of government, policies of government, reforms of government. And to crown it all, under the Minister of State for Industry and the Minister of Industry and Investment, we have an Industrial Revolution Work Group that is co-chaired by the Minister and the President of MAN, such that we have an interministerial structure that solves for implementation gaps. We are hopeful that having put in all these structures, we'll be able to guarantee that implementation will be assured. And it will be very easy for us to call out government, to engage government, and to encourage government to be able to stay the focus, particularly at this time that we are entering a lot of political activism, where governments tend to take their eyes off the ball. So since we are actively engaged, we are hopeful, and I think the Honorable Minister and his team have demonstrated that they want to stay the course. So we will be there. We will be looking forward to implementation. And I think Nigerians should also ensure that this government delivers on what is in the industrial policy, because we cannot afford another miss. The world is moving on, and we must just follow.
Now, let's talk practicality now. Let's look at what it means for manufacturers now like you. You're the Director General, and of course, you get all of these concerns and complaints. Now, what does this intend to address with regards to the challenges that the manufacturers have faced all along before now? That's on one side. How well will this make Nigeria become competitive, particularly in that AFCFTA market? Because if we are not productive, we can't compete in that market.
I mean, we give aid to some countries. We are always there to deliver on their needs. Now should be the time for us to have our payback. So we needed to restructure many processes. We needed to ensure that the reforms of this administration give birth to an improved environment. So what is in this for us? We have earlier on outlined those binding constraints that has continued to limit the performance of the manufacturing sector. And that went into creating what the objectives of the policy should be. It has to do with economic growth and development. We focus on competitiveness and export. We recognize the relevance of employment and skills development. So in setting out the parameters for our success, we identified financing and investment, institutionalization of processes that will lead to local content development, and sustainability, because we have to create an ecosystem that allows for concern on the environment to thrive. When we said these are the basic objectives, we now drilled down to what those challenges for manufacturers has been and how we'll be able to solve for them in an environment that is governed by policy. And we engage on strategic planning, which is aimed at ensuring diligent implementation. For instance, in terms of power, even before the policy was launched, we created an atmosphere of a test case in the industrial area, where we have a climate of solutions for solving for electricity. And we are going to have connection to the national grid and provision for alternative use of energy, so that we'll be able to use this as a test case and escalate clusters across the country for us to have them play in the room and encourage public-private partnership. And those incentives that are being given by government in alignment with the tax policies of government, that has been recently signed into law, that we're able to provide incentives for infrastructure development that will be measured to deliver. So we also spoke about skills development, because it's not possible for you to have a sustainable manufacturing process without the right skills. And all the agencies of government that are set up to improve the skills and industry, government partnership, industry academia partnership, and the tripod for us to be able to identify what skills are needed to scale. I mean, so that we'll be able to match in terms of quality, in terms of standards, and in terms of certification. So in the implementation strategy, we have put all these agencies together so that we'll be able to intentionally identify where the gaps are and be able to resolve it together. And like I said before, I think the joy of this is that we already have a structure that is interministerial and has been working on the themes that translated into the industrial policy for us to solve for the challenges that we have, which is the Industrial Revolution Work Group. And we are hopeful that the government will stay the course. The concern has always been to be intentional and to have presence of mind. And that is what we must continuously emphasize, so that we are able to hold government accountable for the policies that it has set out by itself, and so that whilst the private sector is doing its own, the government and the public sector does not draw us back.
Very, very importantly, because a lot of persons have a role to play in the proper implementation of this, across the entire value chain. And I'm looking at the fact that if we are to set timelines and expected achievements now for practical manufacturers, what positives should we be looking like? Well, yes, the larger economy is also not looking too bad considering the figures that we've seen. And I was going to put you on that too, because I'm going to get your views. The MPC, I think the February MPC is on, and we expect tomorrow that the resolution should be out. Will you also be thinking around that space? But with a larger economy, and if this is properly implemented, what sort of manufacturing sector, industrial space would we see in another 3 to 5 years?
Okay, because I'm very much interested in what the committee will come out with. we must be very frank about not escalating the interest rate. We actually see a more significant lowering And this is because we've achieved reasonable stability in inflation. The exchange rate is looking well. And so the CBN should have no reason not to bring down the interest rate. Increasingly, cost of funds is becoming a greater challenge to manufacturers. Manufacturers are beginning to solve for themselves the issue of power. Foreign exchange has stabilized. So there is need for us to be able to have access to finance. So, and while we keep on advocating for the recapitalization of the back of industry and more funding from international finance windows, we should be able to focus on how we will reduce the rates at which manufacturers borrow. So I'm looking forward to the CBN, the bankers group, so that they are able to bring down the interest rate. As to what we are expecting, manufacturing contribution to GDP has continued to hover around 9, 10, 11%. With the diligent implementation of the Nigeria industrial policy, we should see a gradual, not even a gradual increase. We should see a significant increase to 15% in the first instance. And then we can scale to 20 and 25% at the end of 2035. This is because we have clearly identified those binding constraints that have limited manufacturing performance. And once you solve for them, we should be able to see a manufacturing sector that moves beyond the 50% capacity utilization to 75%, where we are able to have sufficiency in provision of energy, particularly to identified industrial clusters, where we are able to see more synergy between the fiscal and monetary measures, and we are able to see supportive infrastructure. All of these have been identified and clear guidelines given with timelines. So if we all work together, which was the beautiful thing you mentioned, that there has to be all players in the room, every tier of government. And even this policy connects with subnationals. I'm told that the Lagos state government is also crafting its own industrial policy. There should be a synergy because many people forget that there are at least not less than 37 budgets that we roll out every year. All those wants to be intentional about prioritizing industrialization, because industrialization is a strategic choice that every country has to make. Whether you want to be exporting jobs and importing poverty, it has to do with improving domestic production, where you are able to solve for employment, you are able to solve for increased revenue in terms of tax, where you are able to advance technology and where you are able to fund a process that has export orientation so that we can solve for our foreign exchange losses that we have been making. So it is an all-inclusive process. And Nigerians must insist that this administration that has so much goodwill and is expanding in its sphere is able to focus on what it takes to leave a mark for Nigeria's industrialization. For a very long time, we have allowed smaller countries and less endowed countries to be making significant strides. Right. This industrial policy should be seen as a clarion call for Nigerians, and it will make Nigeria more attractive for foreign direct investment, not just portfolio fly-by-night investors, but those people who are going to create real value addition, promote value chain development, and have retention of capital and improve the well-being of the people. I believe that should be the major focus that all stakeholders in this project should be concerned about.
I must thank you again there. I've also told the Honorable Minister that there's going to be monitoring and evaluation from his own end. And of course, DG, you would also continue to do that for us. So from your own end, we'll continue to see how all of this plays out. All we want to see is jobs created and inclusive growth across the board. Sashego Ajayi Kadri, thank you so much, Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Thanks for starting the week with us on Business Nigeria. We appreciate this.
Thank you, Tolu. It's always a pleasure, and please keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.